Hey everybody, I'm Luke, and today I'm the fill-in host for the on-con panels, and today I have a couple of guests with me. I have Eric and Phil, and I'm going to be introducing them here in just a moment, but today we're going to be talking about the story within the story, those kind of hidden gems or allegorical moments within the story that maybe are speaking a little bit deeper than what's on the surface, and so looking forward to talking about that. All right, without any further ado, let me go ahead and get in with our first guest here today. This is Eric. Eric, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell the world who you are and what you do.
Hey everyone, my name is Eric Hodson. I'm at Dreaded Dinosaur on all the social medias. I'm a long-standing indie comic creator and started back in 2005 with my first publishing label, Melby Comics. Fan artist, I did the convention scene, used when we had a convention scene, and very, very famous, well, not very famous, but getting famous for my wrestling art. Also known for my anime style. I work in various different styles. My passion project is the Dreaded Dinosaur Man, which is on Webtoon, which you can check it out on Webtoon, Dreaded Dinosaur Man. I'll be launching a book in the fall for Indiegogo platform. Currently finishing up the Roddy Piper and the Kilted Avenger licensed book, which will be distributed through Pro Wrestling Tees, starring the Hot Rod himself, kind of like a vigilante superhero.
That's pretty awesome. And just so people know, what is Dreaded Dinosaur? Just tell me a little bit more about that.
Dreaded Dinosaur Man is it's a webtoon, which is a comic style, perfect for mobile devices because it's a vertical storytelling format. And this is kind of it's a love story to the 80s for the most part. There's a lot of influences from He-Man and Thundercats, and also 1950s sci-fi. The basic story is the hero's journey. Dinosaur Man has no idea who he was in his previous life, doesn't know why he's the monster that he is. He has conflictions because everyone thinks he's a monster because of the way, his head is a dinosaur's head. He's got a human body, but he's got this massive red T-Lux looking head. And he loses control of the animal side of himself, and the results can be quite brutal. So he battles back and forth whether or not the villagers were right. I am a monster, but he wants to be the hero. He wants to liberate people. And so because of the events in his past, he is very much on this idea of finding the people who need his help and liberating them and setting them free on their own path. And that's the basis for the story on the webtoon, is where it gets into like this adventure saga where every episode he comes across a new race on this alien planet. And the planet that they live on, Tanalorn, is a very unique planet because nobody is native that's there. There's thousands of different populations, different races, things, creatures, but none of them are ever native to the world. So it's kind of like this, almost like a land of the lost, a land of just like all these beings that just end up there, and they, some of them don't know why. Some of them have been there for thousands of years. Some of them just arrived, and they're all in various states of living. And Dinosaur Man's kind of the central figure that opens up this world, which I've got a lot of tree branches planned in the future, but he's the central main character as far as the theatrics go on.
Awesome. All right, that sounds pretty cool. We'll probably get into more of that because I think maybe some of that has something to do with our topic today. I think. All right, the next guest today is Demon Phil Locklear. If you could go ahead and introduce yourself, tell people about you and what you're working on right now.
Hey, Demon Phil, Comics and More, New Jersey. Glad to be here today. What am I working on? What am I not working on? I have been very much working on getting interviews, book reviews, things of that nature done as far as that part of the business. We also have our business, Comics and More New Jersey, which you can look up on YouTube to go ahead and get more information on that, where we use damaged, repurposed comics and magazines to go ahead and create jewelry from that. So a lot more detail if you go look at that. I'm not going to get directly into that now. But as far as I've been incredibly busy doing a lot of interviews, especially with the indie part of the industry, keeping it indie, y'all. And working on doing book reviews and trying to get as much exposure out there for us, because we are reshaping the new normal coming out of this.
We certainly are. We certainly are. Man, I'll tell you, the indie community is staying really busy right now, is what I've noticed. That there's just no shortage of people creating and pushing and promoting and talking. If you are lacking entertainment right now, it's just because you're not looking for it. Quite honestly. So, all right. Well, our topic today, I know we've got a couple more guests that'll probably be making their way in here, and when they do, we'll just go ahead and introduce them and let them kind of give a about what they're doing. But so we all here have read comic books. Obviously, we're all comic book fans, and one of the things that I've always enjoyed about comics is not always just taking the comic or the story at face value, but trying to see if there was something deeper or some greater message that's out there, that's in the story, kind of below the surface. Now, let's go ahead and deal with the elephant in the room. There's always an underlying story, I think, politically with people in things, whether that be from one side of the aisle or the other. So let me ask this question so we can get that out of the way. What do you feel about people projecting some of their political views in comics? And not all at once. So,
I think it's inevitable, along with politics, religious background. When you go to create a project, what's the biggest piece of information you find when you're trying to educate yourself on how to write or how to create is write what you know. And these things, whether it's politics, religion, or a love of Transformer toys, these things are kind of woven into the fabric of who we are. And they're inevitably going to come out in the projects that we create in some fashion or form. There's really no way of being devoid of it. Now, on, I guess you could say, the flip side of that, a competent writer does not have to be from a certain group to write a story about a different group or the same group, because there's just a massive amount of information out there to pull from and research from, and a good, solid writer, creator can kind of put themselves in the shoes, so to speak, and try to clean out the story of that. I think where writing really falls short is where, and not just writing, but I mean, just, creation in general falls short, is when you only know what's in between your ears, and you're in like your ecosphere is a bubble of just agreeing thoughts around you. So you have nothing else to pull from, no other sources for information, for stories, and everything kind of comes out flat and cardboardy, and like every character in a book is just a version of yourself instead of, uniquely complex characters dealing with their own problems and being relatable. And I think that's what really we have a real problem in comics. Not just because a lot of the art is really terrible nowadays, especially in the big two, but the writing is people writing different versions of themselves. I don't want to read an X-Men book where every single character on the group is just the person writing the book in different cosplay. They all have the same thought patterns. They all have the same basic backgrounds. They all have the same beliefs. So it's just a giant echo chamber on a page. I guess I'll pause now because I could probably keep going on a rabbit trail.
We'll get back to that. That's pretty good. Travis is in. Can you hear us? No, Travis is not in.
He's indecisive.
He's teasing us with his presence. Let's go ahead and move on to Phil. Phil, what's your thoughts on that?
So while I am not a member of a creative team or done my own comic or anything like that yet, I'm looking at it as a fan's perspective. So the only way that I can kind of equate that is you have to go way back in comics to Captain America. And the reason I bring that up is because political being put into comics at that time was put in there for the reason to inspire. Comics should be something that you're either trying to get away from your reality or be inspired to go ahead and change something and do something different. And again, this is as a fan, as I'm giving my reasonings here. So, with Captain America coming out, it was an inspiration. It was an inspiration to go ahead and keep moving throughout the war and keep pushing the correct values and all. Now, what is right, what is wrong, that gets into a whole different level of things on here. Whenever you're trying to put the political aspects in there, again, that gets into what is right, what is wrong. So it's hard to inspire whenever you've got too many variables on there, and you don't want to see too much of that because it creates the controversy, which makes it no longer fun and enjoyable and a release from what we are already around.
Yeah. You know, there's something you said, it's pretty quotable. You said it's, you know, comics should either be an escape from your reality or inspire you to want to change your reality, basically is what you're saying. And man, I'll tell you, that's, and I totally agree. You know, I'm kind of in that same camp with you guys, that I think that a person's worldview and a person's, the things that they're passionate about should make it into the writing. So if that, and that I think can get misstrewn as maybe an agenda. Okay. Now let's talk about what the difference between an agenda and allowing your perspectives to influence your story writing. We'll go ahead and start with Phil this time as a fan, as a person who reads a lot of comics and hope you do hope to make one, right? I gathered that from some of the things I've seen.
Yes. Yeah, I'm actually, there's a future project that I'm trying to work on, but so the agenda is something where you make it personally about you. Whenever you're trying to write something with perspective in there, it's where you're trying to get your word out to your audience, to your fans. As far as I'm concerned as a fan, I don't want to see what's going to make, and I'm going to pick on you, Luke, right now. Sorry. But I don't want to read and say, well, this makes Luke's life better, therefore my life should be like Luke's. It should never be that scenario where you're trying to make yourself another person. You want to make yourself a better person, that's fine. And if you want to do that, everyone should aspire to do that anyway, but do it for the right reasons. If you're going to have an agenda in there where you're saying, these are my views, this is what I believe in, my character believes in them, you believe in my character, now you believe in my views. It should not be that black and white with that. It should always have something where it says, these are the options that are available. Your fantasy or your reality could basically be based on these options here if you choose to do so. But these are merely options. That's all it should be in comics. Comics should never be one of those where it actually influences you have to believe or you don't have to believe. You don't have to listen to me right now, and I have no problem with that because that's what the industry is about. But you have the options there, and I have no agenda for you listening to me. So that's kind of where I put that.
Okay. Eric, how about you?
Yeah, I think when it's an agenda, the comic, the story, the TV show, the whatever, just becomes a vehicle for your motives instead of it coming out naturally just as the course of telling a story. Because of course, if you're telling a story, the natural instincts, your natural reactions, those things are going to come out. But again, a good writer can have two different characters from two different backgrounds and be a writer from even a third background and have these two people passionate about their beliefs in the story. When it's an agenda, you don't have that. When it's an agenda, you have everybody, if let's say you have a central character believes A, all the corresponding characters are going to come around to believing A. There's not going to be any real conflict. It's just going to be a vehicle for selling the idea of A to the reader. And that's when it's a clear agenda. Now, when you have a story within a story, these are things that can't necessarily even be gleaned at the moment. They come out over time, where you might learn something about, oh, so-and-so was a war veteran. Well, no wonder they wrote this back 10 years ago. That makes perfect sense now. Those are the types of organic things that come out naturally in the process of good storytelling.
So let me follow-up question. You almost answered it, but so kind of a follow-up question to that is, if you're reading a story, can you tell in the story, and at what point do you kind of notice that, hey, this is an agenda, they're trying to get me to think a certain way and behave a certain way that maybe isn't natural to who I am? Travis made it in. I think
the shortest answer.
Have you guys answered that? Yeah.
The shortest answer I could give to that is that it happens when it takes you out of the story, when it removes you from the experience, and it's suddenly just like, wait, what? Oh, come on, that's bull. When you have that response, That's when you're responding to something becoming an agenda instead of being part of the story. If it's part of the story, it's not gonna take you out. You're gonna stay there. You know, that's why you can have controversial things in a good story that maybe they are taboo subjects that you necessarily agree with or don't agree with. But if it's a good story, the reader, the viewer, they're going to stay in that experience. When it becomes an unnecessary agenda, it's going to be a jarring thing. It's going to take them out of the experience altogether. And that's why people walk out of theaters. That's why people stop watching episodes of a show. That's why people put down a comic book and don't go back to pull it later.
Cool. Phil, you want a shot at that one?
The only thing that comes to mind in going through with this is Hydra. I mean, whenever you start thinking about it, Hydra, was that an agenda or was that a political view? It could have gone either way on that. The way I look at it is I don't see an agenda in there. I see it going directly with the story because it ultimately went with good versus evil. You cannot have good without evil. I mean, you can't. You've always got to have a villain in there somewhere. Now, to go ahead and say your political views are making your government the evil thing right now type deal, that to me gets into more of an agenda as far as I'm concerned, because you're trying to force me how to go ahead and think, right wing, left wing, up the middle, whatever, whichever way you want to go, and however many other ways there are. It doesn't make any sense at that point. To me, the comic actually has to have the flow of making me feel better about myself and what's going on in the world around me or the world that I'm creating at that point, or it's not worth it.
Great. Thank you. Travis, we're going to go ahead and go to you so you can introduce yourself, tell people what you're working on right now, what you do, what you're working on. And we'll give you a shot at kind of giving your opinion about the subject of so right now, what we're talking about is the story within the story and using the use of allegory and deeper meanings in stories. And we're kind of talking about the elephant in the room first, the agenda-laden story. And so what's the difference between allowing your personal experience and your personal views move and shape your story versus trying to produce an agenda with your story? So that's kind of so
right.
Have at it.
All right, so I am Travis Gibb. I am the creator of Broke Down in 4 Dead Bodies. We just finished issue 3. Digital rewards just went out yesterday. So that's cool. I just paid the printer, so I should be able to pick that up next week and start shipping that out, which is great. And then we have one more to go on that series. I also have Cthulhu Invades Oz. We just started announcing creative teams for that, so that's been going out and hitting the internets every day. People have been loving that. We just announced Richard Rivera from Stabity Bunny, and Clara, I can't think of her last name right now, but she does the book Shadow Play for Scout with him. She's on that Cthulhu Invades Oz. We have some of the greatest creators in that. We have over 15 creators in that. Well, 15 stories, but there's every team has like 4 creators, so it's crazy. And then me and Luke are working on Zombie Nations, so that's really cool. The first draft of the script has been sent to Luke. We're making some quick edits, and he's going to start drawing some stuff at some point, and I got a logo commission, so that'll be really cool. So that's what I'm working on. So speaking of allegories in comics, and agendas in comics, so it's tough, right? Because on some level you do want agendas in comics, which I know is going to offend people, but we wouldn't be where we are today if Green Arrow and Green Lantern didn't team up and push agenda. They changed comic by the face of comics by pushing the agenda of that stuff. Black characters, their agendas got better. One of the famous stories that we always hear is Marvel said, "Hey, there's not enough white characters in Avengers right now. You seem to be focusing on this Black Panther." So then the next issue, he added a bunch of Nazis to fight, a bunch of white Nazis to fight Black Panther. That's an old story that happened. So that happens. The differences happens is what I heard earlier is when it becomes one voice because of the agenda. That's when it becomes a problem, because when you look at X-Men, there's a lot of different voices in that those conflict each other. Even Civil War, which is one of the better ones, it looked like it was steering towards one agenda. And then when Cap switched sides, you see that there is two sides to this agenda. There's two sides to this story. That's one that was done well versus, maybe Cap turning into Hydra was very, very different. This is fascist. This is the way they are. This is how they tell you how to think, how to act. Did a whole storyline and then had to renege everything just because of that. So, you're losing people left and right here. What is going on?
Reshuffling.
But yeah, that's my thoughts.
All right. So let's get into some of the more nuanced levels of story writing. And so I know as comic fans, there's always, now I was always a big fan of the Ninja Turtles. And the one thing about the Ninja Turtles is there is not really nuance to that story. It's just straight up what it is. But some of the best story writing, and I'm even going to pull from things that aren't comics. I look at things like Tolkien and Lewis and even like the Canterbury Tales and things like that, where there's something else that's being said within the pages, and it causes us to think a little more deeply or to consider things a little more deeply, which might give us that moment to take pause or to question maybe even some of our own reality and our own thinking. So let's just go around. What are some examples that you can think of the story within the story done well, and why? That's a tough one, isn't it? I should have set that one
pushed
out
an allegory or pushed an agenda.
No, that told a story within a story, that used an allegory or did cause you to think more on a topic than maybe you would have before you read it or experienced it.
I've got one.
Sure.
Actually, I just did a review. I don't know if I can name names of the artists and everything on here. Is that cool? I guess. Okay.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
David Dube, I believe that's how you say his last name. He did Demons in the Dark. At first glance, it is just your normal psychological horror book. You're reading through it. There are kids that are, playing Demons and Dungeons and Dragons type thing. Their anger manifests into a character who starts doing some actual killing and everything. And that's pretty much the gist of what the story is without giving too much away. However, and spoiler alert, this is actually one of those books that caught me by surprise, because there's the overlying the story, the story that you got right there, where it's like you're reading this as a horror, as a psychological thriller, that kind of thing. It's actually about the bullying in school and how bad it is and how much you need to go ahead and let go of that hate, or it can actually initially take over and start getting to the point where you can't destroy it. And I enjoyed reading that because that was definitely a story within a story that I was not expecting on that end. So it really got me to thinking about how it was written, how it brought me to that point of getting to that knowledge of that's what this story is for. Because as you're reading it as a regular story, and then it finally hits you, this is what it's actually about. I don't know if that's exactly what you were looking for on there, but that's a prime example of what I was looking at right there.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely shout outs to that artist, that writer for pulling that off. That's great. Is that an indie book?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. See, and you're getting great stuff from indie people. Anybody else?
Well, one of the most recent things that I've and this isn't a comic book, unfortunately, but it's a show on Netflix from Korea called Rugal, and the overall story is basically this superhuman team of police officers going against this criminal underworld called Argos, and they all have different stories where they have been victimized by Argos. So the main character, his fiance was murdered by them, and he's a cop who was investigating them. And the story within the story comes when the characters finally start realizing and learning each other's backstories. And the leader of the group used to be a foot soldier for Argos, like a main hitman, basically. And his ties to the main character involving his sister, who the main character is largely responsible for her getting killed by Argos, and just the the tension between the two characters, realizing that they need to forgive each other to be a cohesive team to work on this greater good of taking down this organization.
So for me, you guys can hear me?
I can hear you. Luke is frozen.
Okay. Well, I'll talk then. We'll
Yes.
see what happens. This is cursed. I think for me, the stories within the stories, obviously, any X-Men story, the early on ones were, really about racism, and then they told it a superhero story. Those are pretty simple. But one of the ones that I was thinking about recently is Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four run. When he talked about when he really had Reed being the smartest man in the world, and what's the cost of that? What's that? And then even like leading up to the Secret Wars crossover, which was basically a continuation of that run. That ego will always kill you. Doom won. He created the whole world, merged them all together, had his perfect world, and it's still. The story was about Doom. Like, you can win, but at what cost? Like, there's always going to be this extra value, this extra thing, and it's not when you finally get it. So that's a big story within a story for that arc.
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. The crazy, how the internet stuff works. Sometimes we'll it just all went down there for a second, but we are back up and going. So I missed a little bit of what Travis said, but Demon Phil, have you responded to this statement yet?
Yeah, that was the one that responded with the Demons in the Dark.
Yes, that's right. Okay. All right. Very good. So yeah, I noticed that one of the comments was that it was, the Matrix, and definitely when you start to see these different layers come out in a story. Now, let's talk about how it's done well, or maybe how you do it. Now, have you ever used these kind of devices in storytelling at all? Let's go ahead and start with Eric.
Yeah, my overall course for largely most of my writing is try to communicate this message of everyone deserves freedom and liberties, things that were instilled in me. And I can remember being a kid, and Optimus Prime, freedom is the right of all sentient beings. And I've really in my old age become a militant civil libertarian, and I really try to put that into my writing, this idea that we come from different backgrounds, but we all have the same rights, and those rights can't be taken from us by any earthly higher power. That's what we should make war against. And that's kind of like the tensions that are in the Dinosaur Man storytelling, as his earliest memories before he doesn't remember being a full human, but his earliest memories that he does have is being captured in slavery as like some sort of zoo attraction for like these games, kind of like the Roman games would be. And so he's very much a liberator in the fact that it doesn't matter how bad it turns out, no form of slavery is a good form of it. So even if he liberates a people and they got to learn the hard way on their own how to survive as themselves, ruling themselves, that's a good thing compared to them living some sort of paradise in slavery. So that's one of the things that he going through as you go through the story, he's going to have a harder and harder time dealing with, and create some complications in how he faces certain situations. And a lot of that comes from things I've learned and things I've dealt with, but also that the internal struggles between the good and evil that we have in ourselves. That's another reason why he struggles with being a monster. Some people call him a monster because they're outright judging him based on the surface, and by right, some of his actions are monstrous because he can't control it at all. But that's a struggle that we all deal with, because we all want to do good, but we err on the side of doing evil because we're ultimately always selfish creatures in the end. So that kind of struggle is always constantly going on within us. And for him, it's very overt, monster or man.
So it sounds very much like you have a story that's kind of going underneath your main story. And I'm finding that a lot of really good story writing does that, but it does it very subtly, and it does it in a very kind of, I like to call it a classy way of doing that. Travis, go ahead and speak to that. Do you use these? Have you used this at all?
Yeah, I think it's mandatory. I mean, I think it is. For instance, Venom. Going to the Heaven, Venom is really a story about alcoholism. If you ask the original writer, you ask Donny Cates, it's about this person who, at certain parts, will go crazy when he's in the Cenobite, and then he has to deal with the real life effects of what happens when he's in that thing. So it's an algorithm for alcoholism and how that reflects. And all the good writers who've written Venom really get that and do that. So yes, when I sit down and write a story, I'm like, what is my sub story that I'm trying to write? So Broke Down in Four Dead Bodies, people wouldn't know about it. It's a love story, but you don't even see the woman until issue 4. Like it's kind of crazy. Like I actually said that in an interview once, and someone's like, "What?" Yes, because you build these subtle stories and these messages that you're trying to say, and it doesn't always have to be an agenda. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just the cusp of the story has to be true to make the whole thing flow. So I always find one cusp that I want to do. When we talk about Voodoo Nations that's coming, it's really a redemption story. So it's a story about losing faith and gaining faith, and how that looks. It's not going to look like that. It's not going to feel like that, but it's in there,
Yeah. Phil, I know, I don't want you to give any spoilers of what you've been writing or working on, but can you speak to that?
I actually want you to give spoilers.
He does, yeah. Give us spoilers, but
the only thing I can tell you is there is a novel that I had started probably about a decade ago, and of course now I have a little bit of time, and I've been kind of looking back into it, and it looks like I'm going to turn that into a comic. I'm just working on some details and trying to get that. So I can't really give details about what it's about and who's in it and that kind of thing. But I am very excited because coming from the outside as a fan and coming into being with people like you, I mean, it's amazing to actually learn how to do all of this and different ideas that I can use in my own way to go ahead and give it that little twist that I like of my own. That's what I'm enjoying doing. So, I mean, that's all that I'm really working on with that. But as far as writing, yes, you can write it with the underlying story on there. My style, I won't call it the flashbacks scenario on there, but it's basically where you see something, but you have to actually flip back and go, wait a minute, did I actually read that correctly? Because you'll go a couple of pages up and you'll see something else and you'll go, wait a minute, that was actually happening. It's one of those things that's kind of like I'll use the word twist because I don't want to use the other one and get kicked off Facebook, but yeah, it messes with your mind. I like those kind of things. So the underlying story that way, I don't do the full, write an additional story and then a story on top with layers. I haven't gotten to that point. And of course, I'm not at the level of most everyone else in this group here by any means. But the way that I like to do it is just have something where it generates that interest. It's like planting seeds almost is the way I like to go ahead and explain it. If you plant the seed and then you go a little bit further and you see that something's growing, you're like, wait a minute, there was a seed planted back there. Let me see where that was. And you have to go back to it. So that's the wording that I like to use for what I like to do or would like to have in my upcoming works.
Yeah. Subplotting is I think it's complicated. But I've seen people do it really well, and I've seen people do it very poorly, where it's like, here's the plot and then some subplots, and then it gets all convoluted and crazy, but it's very difficult to do it well.
Yeah, I think in terms of subplotting, you really need to spend a lot of time on your world building beforehand, because it's not something that you can do like ad hoc, like, oh, I want to start a subplot here. You really have to start laying those seeds really early. One of the things when I decided to do the Dinosaur Man webtoon is I spent the whole first year just writing out my thoughts into this big Google document encyclopedia that I can go back to and pull from. And that's allowed me to really map out the interpersonal relationships of various characters and groups beforehand. And then I can just natively, organically kind of lay seeds here and there that somebody who follows who will ultimately follow the whole narrative can go back and, oh man, I remember that's a reference to back here that ties this together, and you start to bring these threads through. And So yeah, if you really want to start doing that multi-layered stuff, you've really got to, before you even think of what the character is going to look like, you got to spend a lot of time with the world building.
Oh yeah. So speaking of Dinosaur Man, I don't know if the man behind the curtain can pull up this comment. Not sure who it's from. It's from a Facebook user, but we're picking on Eric a little bit here. It says Dinosaur Man is best when written by guest writers. Winky face. Just saying. LOL. In all seriousness, though, Eric's given a few creators the opportunity to play in the sandbox, which is super cool and super fun. I think that is, man. That's awesome that you do that.
That's someone who wants a job. Don't trust it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Let me ask all of you this. Will since we know Eric does it, we'll go ahead and let him start with it. If you do so, when you let people play in your sandbox, do you give them guidelines? Do you give them rules? Do you let them know what you're trying to do so that they can follow that, or do you just say to heck with it, do whatever you want?
I think if you say to heck with it, do what you want, you ruin the risk of destroying your continuity. So you really, it's a sandbox. So there's boundaries and borders.
That was Varian, by the way. So
yeah, no, he loved the chance to write that ad. He was happy about it, and we're actually going to turn that, I think, into a Last Call Comics exclusive, where we kind of tell this Roadhouse style bar story about his character in the universe. So
that's funny.
Looking forward to putting that together maybe later this year.
Yeah. So Travis, have you ever done any writing of a world or worked with a writer that says, "Hey, I know as a writer yourself. I mean, do you ever?"
Well, I started out where someone gave me 4 pages in the back of their story. They allowed me to write a backup story within certain rules. So that's where I came up from. And I plan on doing it with Broke Down after the first miniseries, but I need people to understand the characters very deeply before I allow people to play in my sandbox. The biggest negative of indie comics is I can't write as good as I can't be as good of a writer as I want to be. Let me explain what I mean by that. There's certain things that people see in my comics. In fact, I just listened to a review right before here where they mentioned, hey, he seems to have cops in issue 2 and issue 3, but they don't seem to serve a purpose or why they're there. And it's because I'm indie. Like, you'd never question that if you were reading a Marvel or DC guy. You're like, oh, this guy's a professional. The cops are going to have an impact at the end. Of course they're going to have an impact at the end. So you've got to kind of dumb things down a little bit, but you don't want to dumb down too much because then they'll think you're not a good writer. So it's this weird balance when you're in indie that you don't want to, you can't write your opus. You've got to kind of be like, all right, I can just tell good stories. You believe me? Now build trust and go from there. But yeah, my goal, I want to give going forward in all my stories, and I think Luke, you and I talked about that, a couple of pages to writers and artists, and I'll pay the teams and get everyone paid to give them a chance. I think that helps build your universe and helps us. As long as it doesn't hurt your main story, why not?
True. Demon Phil, would you ever be open to letting someone have a hack at one of your characters or stories?
I would not have a problem with it. I agree with what Travis said about they've got to be aware. They've got to have a background. I mean, they can't come in and understand my character and just say, oh, I'd like to go this direction with them. That's fine and open to discussion. However, they need to know what the background has been up to that point. You can't just, I hate to say it, and I'm going to bring it up, and I'm probably going to lose followers off of this, but changing Batman from Michael Keaton to some of the other ones that came afterwards. I don't even want to name them because it kind of puts a bad taste in my mouth. But anyway, it's just one of those things where if you change it up too much, then yes, you get that response. So there's a difference between making it pop and taking something that had foundation and just playing around in the cement and chipping away at it and changing it up to a whole different foundation that doesn't make sense. So I would, if I was able to have someone to work underneath me to help me to write something on that, we would definitely have to work together on it in order to get the information out there. It'd have to be a definite communication thing on there, because I wouldn't want what's in here to show up on pages, be completely different and go, yeah, let's go ahead and redo the whole thing. I cannot stand doing that.
I agree. Well, let's go ahead and switch gears just a little bit, and let's talk about, since we're talking about the idea of having a story within the story. Some of my favorite movies are the ones where it teaches someone. Okay, this is going to sound weird. I'm not a huge Nick Cage fan, but I really like the movie The Family Man. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not. But they're kind of in the vein of those movies where you've got a guy who gets a chance to look at what life could be like differently, and then decides he wants that different than what his normal is. And so those kind of underlying stories, but those typically revolve around morality. So let's talk about morality in comics for a little bit, because I know that's not something that a lot of books do. Is it possible to have an underlying or a hidden or a deeper meaning of morality within your book and it not be cheesy? And if so, how do you think that should happen? We'll start with Phil.
Of course, while I'm over here going,
I saw the face. That's why
he saw the eyebrows, and he was like, he clearly has the answer to this question.
Well, I don't have any hair to hide the eyebrows, so of course you're going to see the eyebrows going up.
I know. That's why I wear the hat.
Yeah, next time I'm going to wear the hat. Okay, lesson learned. I don't know. I mean, there are so many that and I'm not able to pinpoint a few in any of them in general right now, but there are so many that you're right, because there are some that come out there too much in the open, and it does become cheesy, because it's like, I feel like I'm watching the after school special at that point. And that was fun whenever I was a kid and that age. But as you get older, the after school special doesn't need to be put in your face for, like the song and dance for 15 minutes scenario. As long as it's underlying in there and you feel better about yourself after reading it, and especially if you can take some kind of life lesson away from it, the biggest thing that I can say right now is integrity. Integrity is the biggest thing that I can see in the comics, that if you go a different direction in the integrity on there, it's going to get pointed out. There are way too many people watching this right now that'll push and pull on every bit of integrity. So if you don't have it in there and you can't see it at the end and actually show that the integrity is true, then yeah, it's not going to fly with me. But I can't come up with a specific comic right now that would actually pinpoint that.
I will bring up, go ahead, a man behind the curtain, bring that back up again. Like a farting elephant that teaches morals. Yeah. Now that's kind of a very overt way of doing it. It's like, we know that like this is teaching a moral thing, but sometimes there's that underlying moral lesson. Like, say for instance with Spider-Man, as he, lets the villain go, the crook go, and then the crook winds up killing Uncle Ben. Then there's that underlying lesson of morality that, I should have done this or should have done that. So I think that's a great example of that. But yes, I do mean something like a farting elephant that teaches morals with farts. I would
like to review a book like that. I'm just going to go and point that out there.
I'm telling you, Phil, it's a good book.
The man behind the curtain has one.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely get with Rob. I'll tell you, it's a great book, and I endorse it 100%. It's going live on Kickstarter on Wednesday. I had an opportunity to see Rob's video for the kind of the pitch, and it pulled my heartstrings, which is really, to be fair, is not that hard to do, but it really did. It got me in the feels, and I'm ready for the world to really back that book the way it deserves to be backed. But let's go with Travis. Morality in comics. Can it be done well without cheese? And if so, how do you do it?
Every comic that works has a morality of some sort. It may not always be the morality you agree with, but there's always one. Spider-Man has a cusp of, great responsibility, great power. That's that. Batman has, always, take no guns, take care of your stuff. I know he had guns in the beginning, but take care of your city, continue to fight for it regardless of how much it beats you down. And, and then the rest of the family's like, hey, family's really important. That's the rest of the morality of Batman. Hey, family's important. And Batman's like, no, it's not. All of them have that, even from, Tony Stark, who's probably the harder one, is, when you have your responsibility for this knowledge or technology, what's your responsibility with that? They all are based off of morality. So I think that's a core. of what you're going to do. But the hardest part is finding characters that that have their own morality, like a villain, like a Magneto or a Doctor Doom. The ones that work all have their own twisted morality. That's what makes them good. That's what makes them a good villain, right? You know, the villain who's just trying to murder you is not great. You know, that doesn't help you. You know, the one who just wants it. Carnage is not a great, though he's fun, is not a great character. All he does is just want to murder and maim. That's his only motivation. But you get someone like Magneto who's like, look, we are evolved. We need to acknowledge that, and we need to take over these weaker. Like that makes sense. You know, I may not agree with it, but it at least makes sense. So it's building those strong moral fibers through comics. That's what makes comics good, and those are the comics that last, right? The ones that have those underlying moral, definitive answers, and the characters that have those moral lines are really interesting. And you could even dig deep. Like every good character has one. Even like someone like Gambit, who doesn't seem like he does. That guy, though he talks like he's a womanizer and a thief, his loyalty to Rogue is ridiculous. Like the things he's gone through to keep that woman is ridiculous. But it's the cusp of his character. If you took that away and for some reason he ever betrayed that, even in a panel or scene, that character wouldn't work because it's been so defined as who his character is. I think that's why they eventually just married him, because he just recently did that, because they're just like, we can't break it. We've messed it up too much. You know, it's too much defining of who he is. And marriage being important, you know, it's been a struggle. Marriage life in comics are a real struggle. You know, that's why they got rid of Mary Jane and Spider-Man. That's why the Black Cat and Batman never went. It's because it's a hard thing to keep interesting. Even though I disagree, I think Spider-Man and Mary Jane were fine. I didn't think it was a problem. But you know, that's been a hard line for comics, because you want to get younger readers in, and they just don't understand marriage. Apparently, we're all from broken homes, so can't understand this anymore.
Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing I'd like to bring in is the concept of the anti-hero. And if you look at somebody like Punisher, who if you were to look at him in black and white terms, he's a villain because he's breaking our these moral codes of, you know, not taking a life. But because he is an empathetic character, there's some level. I mean, which one of us? Not a single one of us could say that they don't have like some sort of revenge fantasy that they struggle with something that happened to them into their life. So on that level, Punisher becomes a relatable character. So we can understand his morality, regardless if we agree with it or not. You know, the exact, you know, an opposite to him would be Batman, who absolutely will not take a life to serve justice. And the Punisher, that's number one on his list, is to serve justice to take a life. And the two of them can stand side by side as both being heroes, although Punisher is more of an anti-hero, but really they both have a strong moral code that we can understand, we can agree with in part with both characters, or, you know, just depending on where you fall, and those characters become relatable and understandable. I think if you were to, you know, people who don't write well, they write characters that are largely cardboard cutout versions of themselves, a reflection in the mirror. They aren't able to relate to people in the real world, so their characters aren't able to relate to readers. And one of the reasons is because they don't necessarily have any sort of internal morality that anybody can relate to, whether it's a good morality or a bad version of morality, you know, whatever that internal code is. It's not relatable in some fashion, so it creates this disconnect. And yeah, so back to my point with the anti-hero, that's a way that you can show that characters can be complicated, not black and white, but still connect and still communicate that they definitely have a moral code. It's just completely different than what we might think.
Yeah. Phil, did you have anything to say about this, or have I asked you that already?
Yeah, you already asked me.
Okay, good.
I actually wanted to say something about the Punisher that's really interesting. So when you go to Civil War, though he has all this endurance and he's got to kill villains, the minute Captain America tells him not to, he salutes and like takes a beating, like, which I found the most fascinating thing about Punisher. Just that his respect for the authority of what Captain America being a war hero and being a war vet, like it was such a unique turn, but you really got it. And you may not know this, but that was the first crossover that Punisher was ever allowed to be a part of. You know, he had like tie-ins or whatever, but he was never allowed in the core, you know, Infinity War, Infinity Gauntlet. Like, what is Punisher going to do? Come on, get out of here.
It's just a really, really nice layer to the character, which brings me to kind of the last thing that we'll talk about, and then we'll wrap up for the day, for this hour. It's this. We have basically been covering kind of the advanced class in writing, you know, kind of storytelling and nuanced layers and things like that. And so let's talk briefly about being able, can you teach a positive message, or can you underlie that through a bad character? Do you think you can do that? And what's some positive examples, either from your own work or from some other work that you've seen that happen? And let's go ahead and start with Eric.
I think, yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, the redemption storyline, you think of, Empire, you know, Return of the Jedi with Darth Vader. You know, the reason why we all cling to the original trilogy is because that was the arc, that was the redemptive story of telling, of communicating that through the villain largely, because even with what they tried to do with the prequels, it was still about Anakin Skywalker and his journey. You know, the prequels are his journey into darkness, but the original trilogy was really about him coming out of darkness. And and I think those are the most relatable characters, because it's the exact opposite of the typical, like the Mary Sue character, which is a character that everything comes easy for, has no internal struggle, is just like, it just always works, never has to struggle with anything. Whereas if you come at it from a villain angle, you've got somebody at their lowest lows climbing up. Everybody can relate to that, because we've all had our lows. We've all probably thought about how low we could go and like, no, I'm keeping back. So whenever we get the chance to see someone come up from that, it is hopeful, it's inspiring. And I think it becomes an even more powerful vehicle for whatever you're trying to communicate, whatever good moral you're trying to communicate, than if it was more top down, somebody who was already without reproach trying to teach that lesson. Very good. All right, Phil?
The only thing that's coming to mind, I'm trying to rack my brain to go through some things here, but I'm thinking of Thanos. Yeah, he's a villain, but he had the right reasonings for what he wanted to do, just the wrong way of doing it. And that's kind of, a lot of times whenever you're doing something bad, that's the right reasonings, wrong way. I mean, there are some just totally evil bad guys out there, not even bring those up. But Thanos, he wanted to go ahead and save half of humanity, at least, from what was coming up by going ahead and snapping his fingers. But did that make him the actual villain? Did that make him a hero? Did that make him an anti-hero? It kind of made him where he's the bad guy, because yes, of course, he took all these people away from everybody, but he was doing it for the right reasons. So the morality is there of, you always want to do your best to go ahead and make things better, but at what degree? So it really brings up that whole Schrodinger's box of, what are you going to do here? I mean, you've got two choices. Which way are you going to go? And he just split it right down the middle, pun intended, and went ahead and snapped his fingers. And that's to me, that made him the villain, but for the right reasons, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I've sat in traffic before, and I'm saying, I'm not saying that Thanos was right, but I get what he was saying. I get it. All right, Travis, how about you, man?
Yeah, I think the best one in recent memory was Superior Spider-Man.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
For those who don't know, they killed Spider-Man for a little bit, and Dr. Octopus took over his story, took over his body, and using Dr. Doom, seeing Peter Parker through his lens and changing his behaviors and attitudes, positive and negative. So some things Dr. Doom just couldn't get. His ego couldn't be Peter Parker, so he couldn't get things. But some things he excelled at. Like he showed, like Peter Parker is more than capable of being just as smart as Reed Richards. He's very, very smart. He can own his own corporation. He can do all these things. He built him up to do all those things, and building that cusp and having Dr. Octopus coming out of that, no longer being able to be the same villain that he was, which is really, really unique because Spider-Man struggles with those characters, right? Fantastic Four has Dr. Doom. They're double sides of the same character. Professor X, Magneto, same side. Spider-Man just had villains based off of animals, right? Here's your Rhino. Here's your Goblin. Here's your here's Hydro Man. Here's Molten Man. Here's
Scorpion, my favorite.
Right. Here, let's just throw random blank man at Spider-Man, and then we're good to go. They didn't have that moral compass, so having Dr. Octopus change and do that is really, really good, and we really get to see who Dr. Octopus was as a character and what made him tick. And what made him so different. Because a lot of people don't realize, because they put Spider-Man under this lens, the Sinister Six is Dr. Octopus's thing. It's never been Green Goblin's. And people, when they do the animated shows or movies, they always throw Green Goblin into being in charge of that. But no, Dr. Octopus always just wanted to break Spider-Man down to the core of who he was and punish him for his accident, where Green Goblin just wants to make his life miserable, like every aspect of his life miserable. They're different cusps, and they have different agendas and how they work. I kind of went with Spider-Man tangent.
I kind of always felt like maybe I'll just add this. I always kind of always felt like Doc Ock was almost just really upset by Peter's morality.
Right? Yeah. Especially he never understood, like. Dr. Octopus didn't understand, if you have power, why do you not take what you want? Like Dr. Octopus just cannot fathom, if you have as much power as Spider-Man, why are you not just taking what you want? And that's when they switched roles and he was Spider-Man for a bit. He had to deal with, okay, I have all this power. Oh, it's not that easy, right? So that's interesting. In my own stories, yeah, absolutely. My bad guys, struggle and do bad things, and I actually even don't check the throat. So someone read issue 2 and the main antagonist actually kills somebody. So there was a guy, innocent, that came in the scene, and the antagonist, the protagonist, kills the innocent. And normally that's a bad no-no, right? When you're writing crime movies, or you want to show that, oh, they're not just killing everybody. They're just killing, the bad guys, or the bad guys, or the people who screwed them over. They're getting their revenge. But I don't think that's real life. I think once you've clicked that, you've done that. So now I have to build that. Okay, so I've shown this guy can do that. Now I have to show his moral character through that, because you see a moral character, you got that, and then when he did something that made you feel that wasn't there. So what is right and wrong for this person? And each of my characters have to have their own set of right and wrong, and what that looks like. And I want to tell that story because I come from a drug and alcohol family. I've seen a lot of bad things happen, but I know a lot of really good people who are users of cocaine, drugs, and addiction is the problem, not them as a person.
Yeah, that makes total sense, man. I kind of come from a similar background. I think one of the things that's probably most inspiring about comics is being able to find that person or that character that can help you be inspired to be a better person today than who you were yesterday, and to try to leave the wood pile a little higher than what we found it. And that's always kind of my motto: try to be better today than you were yesterday, and leave the wood pile a little bit higher than you found it. And so thank you guys for joining us today. I'm just going to go around real quick for the next few seconds. And I want you just to once again tell the viewers who you are and how they can find you, and maybe anything, if you have anything you need to plug, go ahead and do that as well. We're going to go ahead and start down in the corner with Demon Phil.
Demon Phil, Comics and More, New Jersey. And, well, if you haven't seen my face online, you haven't been looking close enough, I am on here doing interviews, reviews, for books. In fact, if you have a book that you'd like to have reviewed, get with me, send me a message, let me know. If you'd like to have an interview, let me know. I do have a schedule that I'm trying to keep with this because I can only Ironman this for so long. I will say, as far as a plug, this Friday, I have Tom Hutchison of Big Dog Inc. I will have him at 9 o'clock at night Eastern. We will be live. And I'm going to go ahead and give you an exclusive right now because I haven't even put the promo out. Right now, you will find out as of 3 o'clock Friday on this Friday coming up, I will have Kara Nicole will be live as an interview as well.
Wow.
So
Awesome.
a couple of great people. I can honestly call them friends. I have met so many friends on here, but I'm letting you know as an exclusive, yes, she will be on here. She will be an interview. So I'll be having that. And if you think I'm getting started right now, you've seen nothing yet. So keep your eyes peeled. Keep it indie, y'all.
Go ahead, man, behind the curtain. Throw someone else up.
Hello, hello, hello. I am Travis Gibb. You can find me at brokedownandfourdeadbodies.com or anywhere, really. Travis Gibb is my name, and I'm everywhere under that name, so it's pretty easy to find me. So things to plug. So I have issue 3. I'm picking up from the printers. So if you haven't picked up Broke Down and Four Dead Bodies, and you like crime stuff, if you are wondering why Quentin Tarantino keeps writing cowboy movies and you want him to write crime, I help fill that void until he decides to write crime again. But he's only got a couple movies left, so I can't promise you anything. Stick with Guy Ritchie. He seems to be going back to crime. The Gentleman is a fantastic movie. I highly recommend. Other things I got, Cthulhu Invades Oz. That's coming out in October. I have I've handpicked some of the best creators in indie comics to do this wonderful anthology that shows what would happen if Oz was invaded by Cthulhu. I have The Advocator. We have 2 issues of The Advocator coming out. We just announced that Starcross, the company that Luke works for, is going to be doing an issue, and that's going to be a completely Advocator. What it is, it's a six stories, 4 pages each of existing franchises, meaning a Broke Down and Four Dead Body story could be in there. There'd be 4 pages of it to kind of give you a taste of what that's like so you can hunt it down. So Starcross has put a lot of their line right in this book, and they're going to try that out later this year. We also have The Advocator 2020, which is a trade paperback, probably about this size, of Lock and Key #2. That's going to be full of various stories from various creators celebrating indie comics. So we're going to be doing that later this year. Last thing is I got Voodoo Nations. We don't have a release date quite yet for that because of Luke. Apparently he's got to draw it or whatever.
Oops.
Whatever that means. He'll address that during his time. But yeah, we're working on that right now, and I'm really excited about that book. Then I got a couple things coming out that's not announced. If anybody needs to talk to me or anybody needs advice on how to run a Kickstarter or really anything, just let me know. I'll have it out.
Yeah, and I'm Eric Hodson. I'm at Dreaded Dinosaur on all the social media fun things. This is my website, erichodson.com. You can check out my wrestling art, my anime art. There's a selection to buy some prints if you'd like. Please check out my webtoon, The Dreaded Dinosaur Man, and subscribe to that. I've got new chapters that I'm working on. Hopefully the first drop will drop into this month. And that story will be building up to the release of the Indiegogo campaign later on in the fall for the print comic Dinosaur Man as well. And later on this year, look for an announcement probably from Pro Wrestling Tees and Mess Bugga Comics on the availability of Roddy Piper as we are finishing up the Kilted Avenger. And we'll get that to our backers first and then get that out to everyone who missed out on the campaign earlier on in a couple of years ago. So, yeah. Lots of good things going on. Again, my website, erichodson.com. And you can follow me at Dreaded Dinosaur, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and all that wonderful stuff.
All right. Thank you. Thanks again to all of the panelists. You guys have been amazing today. Great insight, great input from everyone. I have been Luke Stone, your host today for the Indie Advocator, whatever online con Yeah, that stuff. I'm filling in for Rob today. So not typically what I do, but I've had a lot of fun doing that. You can find me at lukestonestudios.com. While you're there, you can look up all my different social media stuff, and you can find us there. Just finished up a Hybrids, the Sons of Gods issues 1 through 5 campaign. Did very well with that, and so we're happy with that. And I am working on a book with Travis. Looking forward to having that out, called Voodoo Nations, and so that should be releasing at some point this year. We're going to work and tighten up our release on that one as well. So thanks again for joining us for the OnCon panel today, and make sure to look up all of these great creators and look up and buy their book and like their Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So all right, guys, have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.